What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Wisconsin Sportsman podcast, which is brought to you by Lone Wolf Custom Gear. I'm your host, Pierce Nellis, and this is your home for all things hunting, fishing, and conservation in the Badger State. Folks, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you are enjoying what is shaping up to be a freaking great spring so far. You know what I mean? The birds are gobbling like crazy. The trout are super happy. The pre-spawn bass action starting to heat up a little bit. There's just a ton of stuff to do outside right now. So whatever it is that that calls to you, I hope that you are getting out, enjoying it, and just having yourself a great spring so far. As I record this, it is Wednesday the 6th. So that'll be the opener of season D for our turkey season here in Wisconsin. I got out there this morning on some public, wanted to go back and revisit some of the birds that gave me the slip a week ago at the start of period C. Those birds were nowhere to be found, unfortunately. So I ended up sitting up on the same ridge. I was listening for a couple minutes, and I heard a gobble way off in the distance, like freaking way off there. And I used the compass feature on Onyx to kind of orient myself in the general direction. And there was part of me that was like, well, there's a chance that that bird's on public and he's just tucked way back in this back corner, and maybe he'll just be hanging out in this field and it'll be great. There's a better chance that he's beyond the public onto the private, and he's sitting on a ridge top in what looks like an ag field, just gobbling his head off and probably waiting for the ladies to come to him. And so after I didn't hear anything on the ridge that I was on, I decided, you know what? I should just go chase this gobble because, what do I have to lose? It's at least a lead. You know what I mean? And I start hiking over there. I bump a turkey on the way there. Basically after I'd walked like 100 yards, I bumped one. I couldn't tell if it was a tom or a hen or anything like that, but that thing flies off. So I kind of kicked myself, but I'm like, you know what? Whatever. He was silent anyways. We want the hammering birds. We want the excitement. And I continued walking. As I dipped down into this ravine and came back up the other side, I bumped another turkey. Also couldn't tell if that was a hen or a tom or what exactly was going on, but I decided to remain hard-headed and continue working my way towards this bird that was just gobbling nonstop. Like it was maximum every 5 minutes he was hammering. And so I get back there and I'm one ridge over from the back corner of this piece, and I hear this bird gobble, and I'm like, son of a gun. That's definitely not inside of 200 yards. That joker is back on that private field, and he's going crazy still, but he sure as heck isn't right here where I'm going to be able to maybe put the slip on him and get something to happen. So I get in the back corner of this piece. I start calling a little bit, and he's responding and responding and responding. Now, after about 5 minutes, I hear some hens yelping in his general direction. So I'm about ready to hang it up. I'm like, whatever, we'll see how he reacts to this. Because if he keeps gobbling, we're hopefully at least in the game. If he shuts up and goes totally quiet, then I'm just going to assume that that those hens found him and took off, and I'm going to head back and either try and strike up another bird or just go enjoy some coffee because I don't, I got a lot of stuff to do today. So long story short, this bird continues to gobble, and I try going quiet on him. He keeps gobbling, not any closer, but he keeps gobbling. And eventually I get up into the field, not the field that he's in, obviously, but on this public field, right in the corner of this thing. I think, well, maybe if I at least sound like I'm still in the area, but I'm maybe working away, that'll get him to break. And I get up there, I give him a couple like clucks and, a couple of cuts, and he hammers like right away, clearly responding to my callings. I'm like, great, this is awesome. Like maybe he'll do it. I get set back up. Another 10 minutes or so goes by. He's gobbling, but those gobbles aren't getting any closer. And after that, I, you know what? I got nothing to lose. Time to get aggressive. Let's get loud. Let's see what we can do. So I get on the Weathered Oaks glass, the glass side of my Weathered Oaks game call from old Matt Strime, and I just start ripping on that thing. Um, Bunch of cuts, bunch of yelps, all that good stuff. More cuts than yelps. Really trying to like get him excited. And he's gobbling, he's gobbling, he's gobbling. I go quiet, give him another 10, 15 minutes. He keeps gobbling again, not any closer. Finally, it sounds like he's maybe got a touch closer. And I get on the call again. I start, pop, 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 yo, 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 yo. And this time he is amped, like super fired up. Now, between this bird and I, there's a ravine and a house. Now, the house is set back off a ways, but he's going to have to basically cross down through this ravine, up through the yard, and across the driveway, and then hopefully cross the fence, or there's no fence, but like cross the boundary and come onto this little back corner public field here. So I'm hoping that he's going to do that. It sounds like he's finally getting closer, and I get him real fired up. He's gobbling like crazy. I call back to him. He starts gobbling over my calling and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, all right, he's amped. Finally, he is clearly closer. I'm like, great. He has crossed the ravine and he is coming up here. It's on, baby. Like, finally, after working this bird for almost 3 hours at this point, it is finally on. He's going to do it. And he comes up and he's gobbling, and he even double gobbles. And so I'm like, he's sold. I'm going to shut up. I'm not doing anything now. And right after he double gobbles, I hear off in the distance, but not super far off, I hear like a clank, like a metal clank, like a thunk. And I think, well, what the heck was that? Kind of goofy. I don't think anybody else is back here. And I quickly realized that that was like the clank of I don't know if it was a shovel or a wheelbarrow or a side by. I don't know what it was, but I realized that just at this opportune moment, the landowner decided, hey, better start getting after the garden work, the landscaping work, or whatever it is. Shortly after that, I hear him shouting at his dog or something like that. I don't know, but I try calling a little bit more, no gobbles. I wait him out another 15, 20 minutes as my heart begins to sink, and again, no gobbles. So gave him a little bit more time, and long story short, got blocked by the neighbor there. So that was a bummer, but exciting morning. Fun game of back and forth, at least with that Tom. Would have been nice for him to finally come in a little bit quicker maybe, but what do you do, right? That's turkey hunting. So I'm going to be guiding the next 4 days here. And so I don't know when I'm going to be able to get out next, because we've got just a packed schedule. I am getting a little behind on some of the home projects here, but I have been guiding my butt off so far this spring. It has been an awesome spring. The trout have been super happy. Creeks are on the drop again. And due to this busy schedule, it can be tough to line up guests for this podcast. And so I'm going to be flying solo again. And I really wanted to do a Driftless Trout episode. I've done a handful of these in the past, right? And I really wanted to focus hard on what are some of the more nuanced things that I find myself repeating quite a bit, or like explaining quite a bit to some of my clients and folks that fish with me and everything. And I wanted to put that into a podcast and just hopefully share some knowledge with you guys. I'm going to do my best to explain this stuff in a way that's like kind of visual. But really, I want you guys to have more success on the trout streams. I want you guys to be more confident as you head out into the driftless and start harassing some of these trout here. And so that's what this episode is going to be. I'm going to be kind of just doing a little bit of a brain dump on some of my my thoughts from guiding so far this year, and things that I've made note of and everything over the last year or two. And I think the first one I'm going to kick things off with is our casting. Before we even get a fly in the water, before we even start thinking about our cast, uh, one of the biggest things we can do, the most important things we can do, is quite simply, and a lot of the stuff might seem common sense. You're gonna have to bear with me, but I'm hoping some of these things look past the common sense aspect, and acknowledge the excitement aspect of it. Because sometimes we get excited. We're out on the creek. We drove how many hours to get there, and we're so eager to get fishing that we rush things, right? We maybe don't make the best decisions. We don't position ourselves in the best way. And so when it comes to positioning yourself for success, say you've got an area in the creek, a spot that you want to hit, you're trying to get your cast there, trying to deliver that fly, put yourself in position to make that cast. Look really, really hard at what is between you and that your target area, I guess, right? Now, things that I look for are going to be, before I even get to the water, what's at my feet? What's between myself and the water? Um, I always try and get myself and others as close to the water as possible. Reason being, there's just less stuff at your feet that you're going to get snagged and tangled and frustrated with, or be tripping on, or anything like that. Whenever possible, you want to get close to the water. Now, I say close to the water rather than in the water, because close to the water, we're not gonna, like, we there's no variable, there's no risk of spooking those fish through taking a shaky step in, or maybe slipping down the bank or something like that. We're going to make a big splash. We're going to flip over a rock. We're going to send a wake forward going up into this bend pool that we're trying to fish to. And then the fish are going to feel that pressure change and know that something's going on. Um, so whenever we can, if we get the angle to fish from the bank, we want to do it. Now, there's, of course, scenarios where we have to get in the water just to open up a better casting lane for ourselves, whether that be if we've got a tree behind us or something, or a lot of times late summer when we get that really tall bank grass. Casting across the, well, I guess with tall bank grass in our back casting lane, it can be dicey and frustrating at times. And so as we approach the water, we want to get close to the water so that all of our slack line that's at our feet and everything, it's not going to wrap around our feet. It's not going to get snagged on dead grass or, thorns, or whatever it may be that's going to interrupt our casting stroke. So draw that imaginary line between you and your target, looking at what's on the bank. What am I going to snag on? And try and put as few obstacles between you and your target as possible. Other things that you got to worry about once we're looking at the water itself: is there a conflicting current? A lot of times we can see a back eddy start to swirl. There's usually some bubbles in those, so we can see kind of a slow section, or even a section that's flowing backwards against the main current there in those eddies. Is there anything that's going to grab my fly line and cause my cast to not be able to actually drift properly? You know what I mean? And so just get yourself in the headspace of that. Um, I mentioned at the beginning there, like, don't rush. You know what I mean? The fish aren't going to go anywhere. So give yourself time to get situated, get in position, take your time getting to the bank. You know what I mean? Don't be in a big rush and be tripping and, having heavy footfalls that might send vibrations down through the bank and into the water that the fish can feel, all that sort of stuff. The fish are not going anywhere. Most of these streams are super small, about as wide as a city street or a sidewalk in some cases. There's not a lot of places for these fish to run. You know what I mean? It's not like a deer that's going to hightail it, a couple hundred yards over the ridge into the next county or whatever it may be. So get yourself in position, get yourself situated, strip off an arm length or two of fly line so that you've got line to cast. So often I see folks get up there and they don't have any line off their reel, and they want to just get in there and they'll start stripping line as they go. Well, then they have 5, 6, 9, 10 false casts while they're trying to pull off an arm, a couple feet of fly line at a time, or a lot of times it's a couple inches, because we just, especially newer anglers, they tend to, having the extra line at your feet it's like a psychological hurdle to get over, right? So give yourself an arm length or two of fly line to get started so that you can get that line out there and you can have control over that line. You can start to get enough fly line out of there so that you can flex your rod in an appropriate manner. You're going to be able to load it and deliver an accurate cast. On the note of that, practicing your casts is critical. And with the cast, so many folks, if you've taken a casting lesson where you're on flat ground or you're casting off of a boat or you're making really long casts, on bigger rivers, whatever scenario, lakes, ponds, whatever it may be, the casting stroke is far more open in those scenarios where you're dealing with more line because you have to move more line. You have to load the rod more. It takes more time and distance to flex that rod and move all of, if you've got 40 feet of fly line, 50 feet of fly line out of your rod tip. On our streams, we really don't make casts with that amount of line. A lot of our fish are caught in that 20 to 30 foot range. And having a 20 to 30 foot cast is a much different process than casting 40 to 60 feet of line. You know what I mean? So in fly fishing, as many of us know, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you, I'm sure you know that we are casting merely weightless flies, and we have a weighted fly line that's actually doing the energy transfer to load the rod and also like create the energy transfer that turns over the cast. Our leaders are tapered, our fly lines are tapered in a way that they transfer energy down towards our flies so that it creates that nice sideways J, that loop in our fly cast that actually transfers the energy to deliver our fly in a direction that we were trying to cast, right? But when we're dealing with 20 to 30 foot casts, we don't have much fly line out of the tip of our rod, which is why you see a lot of folks in the driftless, they'll overline their fly rods, or they'll do something that's got, a full line weight heavy or a half a line weight heavy, whatever it may be. But if we break it down here, if I'm trying to make a 20 foot cast here, right? Say I've got, for example sake, I've got a 9 foot fly rod and I've got a 7.5 to 9 foot leader, right? So between those two, I'm at about 18 feet. If we figure 9 and 9, right? If I want to get to 20 feet, that's only 2 feet of fly line out of the tip of my rod. You know what I mean? And so if we're going to go to 30, then that's approximately another rod length of line. That's not a ton of fly line. And especially on some of these trout tapered fly lines that have a really, really long front taper, there's not going to be a whole lot of weight in there to actually load the rod and make that short cast easy. So it can feel really clunky at times. And especially if you're trying to open up that casting stroke and you're coming back a little bit further. A lot of times we're doing when you're learning to fly cast, people say like, oh, like we're going to, have your stopping points be 10 and 2, right? When we're casting shorter amounts of line on these small streams where we're a lot of times right on top of these fish, almost think of like if you were to take a picture of you or of your rod position on the back cast and on the forecast. You've got a stopping point in the back cast and a stopping point in the forecast. You've got that 10 and 2 angle. Think of taking that angle that's made and cocking the whole thing forward. So it's really more like 12 or even 1 and 3. You really want to think of like shooting that line straight back up over your head and keeping that backstroke really short. That's going to provide you the most opportunity to quickly shoot that fly line back behind you and then come down on it, driving with that thumb. But you're driving that shorter amount of line, more accurately. And you're going to have a lot more power in that cast, a lot more control in that cast when you have a shorter backstroke than when you try and open that thing all the way back up to 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. You know what I mean? So that's like one of the biggest differences is that you have to have that high back cast and think of coming down over the top of your cast. That's going to result in a lot more accuracy, and it's going to help you load the rod a lot more when dealing with those shorter casts where you've only got a couple of feet of fly line out of the tip of your rod and, a leader with whatever fly on it is that you have. Last thing on the casting note there that I'll say is And this kind of goes without saying, so I don't say this to sound like a smart ass or anything, but make your first cast your best cast. Going back to like the taking a little bit of time to like get yourself situated and do all that kind of stuff, throw a false cast in there. Do not be afraid to throw a false cast in there. It's going to keep your dry flies dry longer. It's going to help them stay buoyant. And on top of that, the whole purpose of the false cast is to build line speed. So you're going to flex the rod a lot more. You're going to be able to feel it a lot more, but also gauge accuracy and distance. You're going to have almost like a practice shot at your cast, a warm up, if you will, before you actually deliver that fly. So get that false cast in there. You don't have to sit there and, do 5, 6, 7 of those things. One false cast is plenty. And when I say that, it's pick up, false cast 1, pick it or back cast again, and then deliver. So think of every back cast as a false cast, excluding the pickup. So it's up 1, false cast, back cast, down, right? On that note there too, so many folks get stuck in the pick up lay down where they just pick it up, throw it right back down, pick it up, throw it right back down. When you're doing that, you only give yourself one opportunity to have perfect timing to deliver that cast. Does that make sense? I know I'm talking to myself here, so hopefully you're nodding along with me. But when we have that pickup lay down cast, and that's all we do, and that's fine in some scenarios, right? But if we get a gust of wind, if our timing's off, if our rod position's weird, we come too far back, or we just don't give our line time to shoot back behind us and fully load the rod, it can result in poor casts. And the poor cast, the fish feel our flies hit the water, even if it's just tiny little dry flies. We're skating caddis or whatever, like we're doing right now. Fish will feel that hit the water. I think there was a Dahlberg study that Larry Dahlberg did a while back where he had like acoustic, like underwater microphones in a swimming pool when he was testing musky flies and musky lures. And they said that the loudest thing hitting the water, even though we're talking throwing like big old like 10, 12-inch musky flies, they said the loudest thing hitting the water was your fly line. So taking the time to properly load that rod up, make a good cast that your leader is going to turn over properly, it's going to all straighten out, and everything can come down and land softly on target, is going to pay dividends down the road. It's going to catch you more fish, and you're going to spook fewer fish than you otherwise would by just getting locked into that pickup and lay down cast. So on the casting front, set yourself up for success. Get yourself close to the water. Eliminate things between you and your target. Practice your short cast. And in practicing that short cast, make your first cast the best cast by throwing in at least one false cast in there to help build that line speed. Now, moving on to the presentation side of things. One of the things that I've struggled to explain until I just kind of recently found the words over the last year or so is that when we're looking at a trout stream, a lot of folks will see a riffle, they'll see a bend pool, they'll see like a what's the best way to describe this? A big feature of a stream, I guess, is the best way to describe that. And they think, okay, great, there's fast moving water, there's the bubble line, there's the bend, there's all this stuff. But they don't look beyond it. They just think, oh, great, trout live in bend pools, but there's more to it than that. Yes, trout live in riffles. They live in deep pockets and stuff like that. All that stuff's great. But if we don't know what's going on within that feature, within that part of the creek, we're just kind of casting blindly and hoping that something happens. You know what I mean? So when we are approaching a stream, or we are approaching a part of a stream, we need to remember that the vast majority, like 85% of a fish's diet, is eaten subsurface, which means that if we were fishing a 2-fly rig, if we're going to go dry dropper, we've got a dry fly, and then off the bend of that hook, we tie our tippet down to a nymph. So we've got 2 flies in the water, one on the surface, one subsurface. the subsurface fly is more likely to be eaten than the dry fly or the surface fly. You know what I mean? So when we're approaching the stream bed, looking at the bottom of the stream, right? So the stream bed will tell you where the fish are, and the surface and the current, when I'm talking about the surface, I'm saying the surface will tell you where your fly needs to be. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick sec to tell you about Lone Wolf Custom Gear. Lone Wolf Custom Gear is as good as it gets when it comes to mobile hunting equipment. Whether you're a saddle or stand guy, public land or private, Lone Wolf Custom Gear has a set of sticks, a stand, a camera arm, and any number of accessories to get you closer to your target buck. To make it even better, everything is 100% USA sourced and made right here in the Midwest. And it's even assembled right across the river in Iowa by hunters who love chasing deer just as much as you do. To build your kit today, go visit lonewolfcustomgear.com. Now, let's get back to the episode. So repeat that real quick. The stream bed tells you where the fish are. The surface will tell you where you need to put your fly. So again, kind of going back to the example of like undercut banks. And basically, this is where like your polarized sunglasses couldn't be more important when you're trying to do this. Like I've been fishing with a couple of people recently who were either fishing without sunglasses or they didn't have polarized sunglasses. And the difference in the amount you can see is staggering. Your polarized sunglasses are your underwater eyes, truly. And they allow you to see the things in the stream bed that make up the stream bed, such as the undercut banks, those depth changes where you've got like the deeper buckets and channels and stuff, that boulder that's sitting in the middle of the current, logs, bottom transitions, like where it goes from like a sandy kind of soft bottom or silty bottom into a gravelly, rocky type bottom, stuff like that. If I were to use the example of like a boulder here, when we're looking below the surface, we see the boulder under the water, right? Now, ideally, that thing is going to be, in most situations, it's going to be pushing water around it. It's displacing that moving water. And so above, in front of, and on either side of that boulder, we're going to see the current doing different things. So typically, if I'm picturing a boulder that I've seen a million times in my life, that boulder's in the middle of the stream. And then on either side of that boulder, there's a current seam that breaks off either side where that current is going around the boulder, right? So rather than just looking at the boulder and thinking to yourself, great, there's a boulder, trout-like boulders, ask yourself, what is the current doing around that boulder? Is there a seam on either side of that boulder that creates a feeding lane for those fish? Remember, trout are going to be sitting in or near current seams because those are the things that are funneling food and oxygen, the two things that trout need most in this world. That's what's going to be keeping them alive, essentially. Then the boulder's there to protect them. The boulder allows them to sit behind it in that soft pocket and they can conserve energy, lean out, grab a bite to eat, or they can tuck up underneath it if they're trying to hide from an aerial predator or whatever it may be. That, like, ask yourself, why do trout like these things? What do they gain from sitting in or below or above or near these different types of structure, right? So if we're going to go back to the boulder example, is there a current seam that creates a feeding lane on either side? Yes. Is there a pocket of soft, slow-moving water that a fish can sit in so that it conserves energy on either side of that? Yes. Now, let's think about it in terms of how do I get my fly to that spot, right? So how deep does that spot look? Can we gauge depth with our polarized sunglasses? How fast is that water moving? Because the faster the water and the deeper that spot, the longer it's going to take for our fly, if we're fishing the subsurface fly, the longer it's going to take for that fly to sink, get to depth, and actually be in the strike zone where it looks natural and that fish just has to lean out, grab a bite to eat, and not expend a bunch of energy going after something that doesn't look natural. That's, a foot or 2 feet up above where all the rest of the food is being funneled, right? So look at that spot, track it back, ask yourself, where does my cast need to go in order for my fly to be at depth, drifting in a natural manner that fish is going to be none the wiser. And he's going to be like, oh, great, here's another bite to eat. That nymph looks juicy. He can lean out, grab a bite. We see our indicator or our dry fly go down if we're fishing a dropper rig, and we set the hook and we land that fish, right? Another thing too, if we are fishing subsurface, which as I mentioned, a lot of times we are, play around with just observing your fly in the water. Get an idea of how quickly that nymph sinks or that streamer sinks. What does it behave like if I kind of twitch my rod or if I strip fly line one way or another? Get an idea of what that fly does when it's in the water so that you have an idea of, okay, like it's only, I don't know, a foot deep in this section. And I've got a little bit longer dropper. Say I've got like an 18-inch dropper and I've got a big tungsten head on that thing. I'm going to throw it into this, spot here. And I know that it takes about 2.5 seconds for that thing to finally like gain all the way to the bottom of its depth and come tight to my dry fly. Okay, if I keep snagging on bottom after I've thrown that into that spot and like 1,000, 2, 1,000, okay, down. Okay, shoot, I must be hitting bottom. But also in deeper pockets and deeper water and stuff like that. Think of where you need to lead that spot. If there's a bubble line leading into one of these things, leading into that bend pool, whatever it may be, track it back a couple of feet. Don't just lead it with the idea of like, well, I just know I need to lead this spot. Like, think about it a little bit more. Calculate, okay, it looks like it takes, if I watch one bubble, it takes it 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. That's about how long it takes for my nymph to get depth. And that's about where I need to land my cast so that I am down in there and it is moving naturally into that fish's line of sight. And you're going to have a lot more success by doing that and thinking a little bit more critically than you would just by lobbing casts into a bend pool or into a riffle. I've said it on this podcast before in previous Driftless Trout episodes that I've done as well, but always fish near to far, right? Fish the things that you can easily reach, and hopefully we pick up a fish rather than bombing all the way to the furthest point and trying to get a really, really long, super long drift in there that every fish can see and all that. Be precise. Target specific areas and break down the stream into lanes, and within those lanes, cross-sect them into different like quadrants, if you can picture that. Like picture a grid across a feeding lane or across a riffle or across a bend pool, and pick that apart from near to far so that we can find those fish that are sitting at the back of the pool first, catch them, pull them back, and those fish up ahead of them are none the wiser to our presence or the fact that we're being fished to right now, right? If we cast all the way up to the top and we say great, we catch that fish that's rising like a maniac. We hook him, we get him in, but we've just drug him through that entire pool. So he's zipping all over the place, fighting like crazy. All the other fish in that pool are going to be like, what the heck is he going nuts for? They start buzzing around. They're not doing what they were just doing. We disrupt the entire hole rather than picking through the back of it and working our way up to the top. Additionally to looking at the stream bed in terms of, it telling you where the fish are, the stream bed also tells you where the fish are not. And it can help us kind of avoid just wasting time trying to cover every square inch of a section of creek there. I did that early on. Like I've said before, I am self-taught. I have made just about every mistake out there. But breaking down the water and looking at fish and the stream as a whole and not wasting time fishing to water where you clearly can't see fish. And this is where the polarized sunglasses come in. Generally speaking, if we are in water that is knee deep or less, and we can see straight to the bottom and we are within a rod length, there's not going to be a fish there. And if there is a fish there, it's not going to be willing to eat, because if we can see it that easily, that fish can definitely see us that easily. Now, there are exceptions to this. A buddy of mine, Brian, who I was guiding a couple weeks ago here, there was one fish that was just rising like a nut job to caddis in this really slow, shallow, glassy section. And we had to stalk that fish and come up literally straight behind that fish in order to deliver a cast that fish, could see. We led that fish. He delivered his fly beautifully, like 2 feet in front of that fish in shallow water. And we could literally see that fish sitting there, moving side to side, feeding while we stalked that fish and worked our way up there. If we can see fish and he's actively feeding, great, fish to him. But don't get in the headspace of, especially if you're coming from like a conventional fishing background. We spent a lot of time, fishing for bluegills under a bobber or crappies or largemouth, whatever it may be. But fishing in more passive ways where, we always talk about like, oh, like got a nibble or something's nibbling on it. Trout don't nibble. We don't get nibbles in fly fishing. Quite like to put it plainly, we do not get nibbles. And viewing the creek from the standpoint of, if I can see the bottom clearly and I don't see a fish, I'm going to move on and not cast. A lot of times I will cast even to the spot where I can look into that stream. I see the bottom plain as day, but then it starts to kind of fade out and it gets into that murky spot, that little kind of hazy blue, green, aqua color there, where it just gets a little bit too much sediment in the water, a little bit too deep where I can't see to the bottom. Chances are that's where a fish is going to be sitting because they feel secure there. They know that they can't be seen from above, or at least not easily. And if you are going to see them from that close, you're going to be right on top of them and they're going to feel you coming before that even happens. So fishing with the mindset of trout don't like to come to us, so we have to go to them, is going to save you a lot of time. And it's going to just help you pick out and kind of like write off different types of water. And as you're walking, if you do spook fish, slow down, take note of the type of water that fish was sitting in. Was he tucked up super close to the bank and he was just under a little clump of grass and felt your footsteps and he took off, or he saw your shadow or something like that? That's going to give you a better indicator for when you get to the next section like that. You're going to have an idea of, okay, well, in that last spot, 50 yards downstream, fish were tucked up really close to the grass, and that's like slow water. They could like really see a bunch, or they were rising to caddis. They were doing whatever. This looks a lot like that. I'm going to look in similar areas for fish doing the same thing. Because a lot of times, you see one fish do it, more often than not, you're going to see the other fish doing the same thing. So key in on similar types of water, similar types of behavior from those trout. And if you see them take off and spook or whatever, pay attention to what they do. Watch where they run. Watch just kind of how they behave after they're spooked, and take note of that stuff going forward so that you can make more informed decisions when you get to the next section there. Moving on. Snags will happen. They have to happen. It's part of regular fishing. It's part of fly fishing, right? The difference is how we retrieve our snags when fly fishing versus spin fishing or fishing with a bait caster, right? So in fly fishing, especially when we're throwing tiny little dry flies or smaller flies, or small rigs or whatever, the biggest difference is obviously that we're like using really light tippet in most scenarios. We've got like a 6-pound test. It's kind of your average really upper range of, your 5X tippet. 4X, you're looking at like 6.5, close to 7, something like that. You know what I mean? So like we don't have a ton of strength to try and rip flies out with, right? It's not like when we're throwing 10-pound test with our spinning rod or bait caster or what have you, and we've got big hooks that we can just kind of rip them out of the grass. Picture your fly cast as we make the cast. So we come back, we stop on the back cast, we pause, we let the fly line straighten out behind us and flex that rod. Then we come forward and we stop the rod again. Now that's a very subtle bit. And a lot of folks, they only focus on the back cast and then they come straight down. And doing that creates a really, really wide open loop. It doesn't shoot the line anywhere. We need that stop on the forecast to create the pivot point that actually deloads. If we picture our rod like a spring, we need the section or the stop there to create the opportunity for that, all that energy that's stored in the rod to deload and actually shoot our fly line out in a straight line in front of us. Now that said, when we've made our cast, when we watch our, fly fishing videos on YouTube and everything, we almost always see the loop and that fly line turn over, that sideways J. If you picture that thing, we see that fly line turn over vertically, like it comes from over the top and then it lays down nice and flat, right? Having that in mind so that we can acknowledge that if a fly lands in the grass, it went in over the top. The worst thing we can do is try and rip it out of there or sweep it out. I say sweep anytime somebody moves their rod like left to right or in like a sideways motion almost. Doing that, you are guaranteed to bury that hook into the stem or into more grass or into, whatever it is that you're snagged on. But you have a chance, just a chance. I'll say that it's not a guarantee. You have a chance of retrieving that fly cleanly and efficiently if we try and take it back out the same way that it came in. So if it comes in over the top and it drops from, the top down, hangs up, if we try and pull that out vertically, like by coming straight up. And when I do that, what I have folks do, you point towards the fly, you get tight to it. You're not like tight where you're like burying the thing in there more, but you remove most of the slack. And just like if you were going to back cast or set the hook, you don't want more power than that. We're not ripping the thing's lips off like we're, in the Bassmasters or anything. I have had folks snap a rod trying to do that. But just with a little pop, and it's just a tiny little dip of the rod tip and then pop back up with the wrist. Doing that, a lot of times it takes tension off of the hook so it disengages, and then it allows it to shoot straight back up. I mentioned sweeping there, trying to like sweep it across your body and move that rod tip laterally. You're going to bury that hook. And the other worst thing you can do is try and like wiggle it out. Like fly gear feels very delicate, very finessey, right? And so a lot of times we think, oh, well, it's just barely in there. I should just tickle the rod tip and just kind of dink it around and try and get that thing to just pop free. It's not going to happen. It flat out will not happen. And more often than not, you're going to make it worse because we're dealing with a tapered leader coming off of a tapered fly line. That material is designed to transfer energy down towards the fly. So if we wiggle it, all we're doing is sending shock waves shooting straight down towards our fly. And more often than not, we find ourselves spinning that fly around the stem or the stick or whatever that we're snagged on, or we find ourselves hanging the section of leader that's just up above that fly that gets wrapped around the next thing or on the thorns or whatever it may be, and just makes things worse. So just remember, your casts go in vertically. Try and get them back out vertically. Don't try and sweep them or rip them out or anything like that. On that note too, I've said it before, I'll say it again, practice your knots so that when it inevitably does happen, that something gets your leaders all chewed up, it's all burned on itself, or it's twisted up and everything just looks like a rat's nest, you have the peace of mind and the confidence to know that, oh, well, that's a bummer. That was silly of me. Why don't I just cut that right off and retie everything, right? Practice your surgeon's knot so that you can add tippet to your leader and rebuild that leader. And of course, practice your clinch knot. Those are the only two knots you really need to know to survive on a trout stream. There's a million other knots out there, but those two, with that surgeon's knot, you can rebuild leader by adding tippet. And with that clinch knot, you can attach all your flies. That's it, right? But practicing those knots will give you the confidence that when you do inevitably snag or create a rat's nest and it's sunny and it's, I don't know, like I always hate it it seems like in the summers when I get my worst snags, and I can remember having days that were like 80 some, I don't know, say 85, and the sun's just beating down and you're sweating your butt off and you're sitting there laboring trying to untangle this horrible rat's nest of hair thin tippet and flies and backtrack everything and undo all that crap. Practice your knots so you can just cut the dang thing off, retie it, and a couple minutes later, you're back in action fishing with a totally fresh rig that you have confidence in that you're going to be able to, just continue enjoying your day on the water. Nothing sucks more than hanging on to a fly that's not working, or a dry fly. You're trying to run a dropper rig and that dry fly is totally waterlogged and saturated, hopefully from fish slime from catching a bunch of fish. But nothing's worse than fishing a fly that sucks or isn't working and not switching it over because we don't have confidence in our knot tying ability. We don't want to take half an hour to retie everything. And at first it will. That's part of the learning curve, right? But the more practice we can give ourselves at home while we're sitting on the couch or in the garage or, doing whatever, the more practice we can give ourselves with those knots that they are familiar, they are automatic, we don't even have to think about them, the better off we're going to be and the more efficient of anglers we are going to be. So those are my big three. Well, I guess it was more than three. Those are my big three sections, I guess, for today's episode on things to just hopefully increase your efficiency and lead you to having a little bit more success on the water. Just to recap, on the casting front, position yourself for success, get all the crap out of the way between you and your target, make sure that you're clear on the back cast and in front of you, have an idea of what you might snag on so that you can then hopefully avoid it. Take your time, strip off a couple arm lengths of fly line before you start casting so that you have something to cast. Make your first cast your best cast by implementing a false cast or two to build that line speed and gauge accuracy and all that. Practice your short casts in that 20 to 30 foot range where you don't have a lot of weight and a lot of fly line out of there. Look at the stream from the stream bed first and then to the surface so that you can visualize where those fish are going to be sitting. Constantly ask yourself why. If you see a fish dart out, why was that fish sitting there? What did that spot have for that fish? More often than not, if it's not an actively feeding fish, it's protection, it's cover, it's concealment. When you see those fish that are eating like crazy, if they're rising or whatever, they're in that spot because it puts them near the food, close enough that they can conserve energy, or if they're being real nuts about it, and there's a crazy hatch going on, they're super aggressively feeding, that is the spot that your fly needs to be in order to feed that fish. That is where all the other food is going to. So when you see a fish in a spot, trust it. Trust that fish that he knows what he's doing and fish to him in that manner, right? Look at those features, look at those spots, track them back to the surface, figure out where your fly needs to be in order to get it there naturally. On the surface, it's easy. For fishing dry flies, piece of cake. We lead that fish by 2 feet, 3 feet, and we're golden. As long as that thing moves in the current at the same exact speed as the rest of the food, that fish is probably going to eat. When we're nymphing and we're kind of prospecting for fish, it's a little bit different. So then we revert back to that, breaking down the water, looking at the different features and fishing near side, far side, or near side, mid range, and then far side. Pick your way through it, work your way to that fish that's at the furthest point, then move on. And if it's cloudy, like muddy water, a lot of times those fish will have a little bit harder time finding that fly. So don't be afraid to give a spot 2 or 3, maybe 4 casts in a row to make sure that there's not a fish there before you move on and start hitting the other spots there. And then lastly, snags happen. Don't wiggle the fly free. Pull it out the same way that it went in. Don't sweep it. Practice your knots, and you will have a much, much, much more enjoyable time on our tiny little driftless trout streams. And I'm excited for you. That's my spiel, you guys. If you're still here, I really appreciate you listening. Trout season is in full swing right now. Our fish are super happy. Streams and rivers were kind of blown out there for, not blown out, they were just high and muddy. Some of them were blown out, but all of our streams are cleared up, totally fishable right now. Things are great. And like I said, I record this today on May 6th on Wednesday here. And so we've got a lot of great trout season up ahead of us here. We are starting to see really consistent caddis hatches, still a couple of holdover olive hatches. We've got some crane flies buzzing around. If we get some overcast or rain or anything like that, or even something that's going to muddy up the water, our streamer fishing will just continue to improve. It's been rock solid lately with the on some of our bigger tributaries and bigger streams where we've got, a lot more haze and a little bit more stain still kind of holding in those lower sections of the river. We can get on some really, really good streamer action. We had an awesome day just the other day with some folks that I have guided before, and just always look forward to those guys coming to town. But all that is to say, the getting is good right now. If you would like to experience the Driftless, you have not before, or you'd want to maybe talk to somebody or fish with somebody who just recorded a 50-minute podcast on the some of the things you heard here today, I would love to take you out fishing. You can find all the information for my guide business, Good Chance Fly Fishing, at goodchanceflyfishing.com. If you want to check out some of the photos from the past couple of trips, I've been kind of slow on the social media front just because we've been so busy, doing trips and getting ready for them and all that. But if you want to stay in the loop and check some of the stuff out, get an idea of the types of areas and the types of fish that we're going to be catching on our Driftless Trout streams, you can find us on social media at Good Chance Fly Fishing. But thank you so much for listening, you guys. I hope this helps. I hope you learned something. And again, if you want to get out, hit me up, www.goodchanceflyfishing.com. I would be thrilled to take you out. And if you have questions about anything when it comes to like gear recommendations or anything like that as you're getting started, by all means, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or submit something through the contact form there. We can get in touch that way. But thank you all so much for listening. Good luck out there, whether you're chasing turkeys or looking for morels or harassing trout or smallmouth or whatever it may be. Enjoy this time of year, and we will talk to you all next Tuesday. Thanks, guys.